still can just stand up and it falls off me as you describe it, the same notion of it just falls off me. Everything that's my ego, I just stand there and teach. And I wonder how did this person arrive? Is this not really me? Is this really me or is it not? And I think it's more real than any other personas we carry around in this life and on a day-to-day level. Yeah.
I'm Alexandra Kreis, and you're listening to Outer Travel in a Journey. Journeying now for 30 years into the life and practice of yoga, I have met many who have taken interesting turns, went past extraordinary bumps, and reached unexpected places. People with whom I shared conversations about everyday struggles, intimate realizations, larger questions, ideas, and dreams. So today, I'm passing on the mic to one of them so we could hear and celebrate the wisdom in people's differences and experiences.
Welcome to Outer Travel in a Journey. On my show today, I have Kat Macmillan from Portland. Hello, Kat. Good to see you.
Hi. Good to see you, Alex.
Kat is a devoted artist and voice facilitator who's come a long way between classical singing and I would almost call it classical Japanese dancing. That's what I know butoh for. But maybe you do us the honor in kind of describing us where you really come from. What's like the brief CV you want to give us?
Sure. Well, I was always singing as a child, and I think I was really informed by music, both instrumental and vocal, and grew up in sort of normal middle class America, musicals and community theater and that sort of thing. And when I was living in New York City, I was introduced to butoh and completely changed my life. At that time, I was studying yoga as well, and I was introduced to Hindustani singing, raga singing,
Hmm.
Indian classical. So these two very different forms have informed me greatly. Butoh in the movement and expression and way to get to authentic performance and presence, and the Hindustani classical singing the same way but through the voice, coming to an authentic expression of voice.
Yeah, and yoga is trying to do that as well to come to authentic expression, but we get to know it as a system that is very strongly carved, and that's what I have. I haven't got enough Buto experience, but maybe you can tell us a little bit what's so special about Buto.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you mentioned yoga because at the time when that was happening, it was really informed by the fact that yoga had come into my life in a really big way and was the grounding practice around all of that.
Hmm.
And I think it helped for me to open to these other practices. The Butoh, as I was introduced to it, I guess we hear of it called, quote unquote, the dance of darkness. And
Yes.
that actually, I don't know if that's actually 100% the way that I would describe it, but it, uh, it came out of post World War II Japan as a reaction to both the atrocities and also the
Hmm.
Western influence, the Westerners coming in so strong culturally, and also to the fact that the dancers and performers had been restricted to very formalized
Hmm.
forms of expression, dance, no theater, kabuke, these ways that were very set. And so it was like a revolution of the body. It was a revolution of expression, a very new way to put things that were evocative and controversial, and to allow for any form of expression that could be shown through the body.
Hmm.
That for that time was very radical.
Hmm.
And so as it came to me, it was um, gosh, it was really about allowing yourself to strip away how you think you should move or dance
Hmm.
and come into a way of discovering choreography from the internal story, which
Yeah.
required a lot of training and
Yeah, you did
self searching.
extensive training with that, and it's quite. I mean, I done a good few trainings with it with somebody in Ireland, but my key connection to butoh was when I saw it in the Irish Dance Festival, and Aiko and Koma performed something, and what I loved about it, and what I then researched and found out about it, was the sense of that we never take grief or death as a portal into life. And that was to me something so substantial that I experienced just watching them. I didn't even know anything about Buto at the time, but I just watched them and I was in awe because there was like the two ends of the stick, or however you want to describe it. They were just placed on stage. There is death and there is life, and
Mhm.
that's why I actually kind of fell in love with it. I think I always had, I love to turn to the dark side, and we know there is ways of expressing that when we look at the existentialists, but what I really respected about seeing that in dance, that was for me a big notion of accomplishment, to say like this is also life, not just a happy with a little bit of drama, but this is life. Death
Yeah,
is life, so to speak. So yeah.
beautiful. Yeah. Well, and what you describe about how it affected you, I think is what attracted me as well, in that when you see someone performing buto, it's affecting the entire room in a
Mm,
way that is just indescribably different than a performance that is performative. It's interactive on the subtle level because there's such energy moving in the dancers on the subtle level. So it changes everyone, and it communicates something in that way. And for me, I think it heals us in that way. Maybe
yeah.
the audience members aren't so comfortable with their own fear of death or their own fear of something from their past, or
Hmm.
a nightmare that they imagine, but because the dancers can reveal this and open to that, it heals everyone. Everyone is allowed to take a look at these things and to grieve or to laugh or to feel more, right? This permission
Absolutely.
given.
And how do they manage? I mean, you are, from your point of view, as you're using it more and more to teach people to come into their own expression, as you said, and voice expression. What is the key element? What makes it so magical in your eyes? Or if you have also technical, I don't know, explanations for it, what is it?
Yeah. Well, there's so many techniques. There's many tools that are in the bag, and a lot of it has to do with stripping away the habitual ways that we move and sound and allowing for something organic to emerge.
Hmm.
And that's done through physical exercises and exercises between performers or dancers or singers. A lot of it is about being witnessed in that
Yeah.
process.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember. I mean, just to give the listener an experience, because we're not showing it, but we could kind of always point. If you have some performances on YouTube or somewhere, we can attach that to our show notes so people can see
yeah,
it. I, how would we describe it? I remember I had to do a lot of kind of strenuous squats. I mean, the warm up in one of the workshops was like, it felt like an hour of squats and anything that I usually do in yoga, but with breath. But I felt really exhausted. And that is
yeah,
probably the first breakdown. That was the first breakdown for me, in a sense of like having to let go of like, I look good in this, and
absolutely.
I can master this.
Yeah. Well, that's part of it. How do we
Mm,
reach a physical limit that then breaks us, so we release into a softening, right? But
mm,
also, that said, the squats doesn't surprise me because so much of the liminal quality of the dance is created often through a very, very seemingly not moving slowness, right? Where the dancer's moving so incredibly slow, you can't really tell if they're moving or not, but they
Yeah.
are moving. And that takes us into this very magical, mystical, sort of liminal space. And in order to do that, one has to be really strong
Mm.
to be able to exert that kind of control in the body without showing strain. And often there's movement from the ground up, so that's where the legs come in.
Yeah.
Doing the squats and
Yeah.
really strengthening through the
Yeah.
core and legs.
Mm. And the other thing that I really resonated with is that in the training we were witnessed. I remember so strongly, and every time I see a tree like that, I'm remembering my training. It's like we were supposed to become trees. And to my own surprise, through the inner world, this was after like a day of workshopping, and we were halved, and one of us or five of us were performing, five of us were watching. Um, and we were supposed to be trees and to really feel inside, and what came out was this tree I didn't had expect. It was so imperfect and so beautiful at the same time, leaning onto the land and into the water. That was my tree, and every time I see a tree like that, I'm like, oh, this is like how I am, and it made me, I couldn't hide it, the noticing that somebody is witnessing me, is watching this, and I'm a very honest performer if I'm asked to, So I wasn't even trying to make up something beautiful and bright and bushy or whatever, It was just coming out of me. It was pouring out of me, and it was such a relief, really, as you
Mm,
say. Yeah. Have you
beautiful.
got similar experiences or?
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel that what comes is not often what you would choose. And it's
Mm-hmm.
surprising. And when that happens, you know that you're actually really touching in on something real. And I think that's the goal of the dance, is to get away from the mind creating the image
Mm.
and allow for the body and the internal story to unfold something that might be completely unexpected and will therefore be so true and
Yeah.
real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you're really facilitating or using this to facilitate what you're trying to work through this pandemic into people's lives as much as you can or not can right now. Can you tell us about your crafting this new way of experiencing yourself between this dance style and your classical singing training?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I found that it brought me back to music. I came back into singing and found that that practice wanted more in my life and in my time. And so, in working with other people, the way that I had learned to become free and open to my own authentic story through dance made perfect sense to work then with voice. So it was as if we just were switching out what maybe we do a workshop and towards the end there was people were displaying their own creation. And instead of it being dancing, it would be something that was created through voice. It was singing. And I
Mm.
found when I was working with butoh and doing those trainings and I started teaching workshops, often I was working with dancers. Sometimes I was working with non dancers. Um, that was always the most interesting to me, were these people who were coming to this practice who weren't coming to perform per se, but they were just coming because they were interested in opening up to that side of themselves and perhaps healing something about their own story through movement, right? Through dance.
Mm.
And so the more that I started working with music and voice, I
Mm.
discovered, wow, it's it's just completely 100% common that you find everyone with this block around singing. Everyone has this idea that they can't sing or that they are a terrible singer or they had a teacher who told them not to sing because they didn't sound right. Everyone has these stories around music.
Yeah.
So I found that the training and the ways that we were working to open the body through butoh completely worked to open the voice, right? I mean,
Mm.
with little adjustments here and there in terms of how the exercises are performed. But the same idea is witnessing, connecting with the others in the room, getting in touch with your own personal truth and story, going
Mm.
into your own personal history,
Mm.
using blindfolds to have an internal experience and making it external. All of these ways, and strengthening the body and moving in unexpected ways to get you out of your normal thinking habit mind.
Yeah.
So, using all of this, now with people who really just had a desire to be able to sing, some of them to be able to sing better, but most of them just to be able to have some confidence around approaching singing, you
Mm.
know, and having their own expression of music and voice in their life, which is so incredibly rewarding. I can't even tell you, that's been just so healing. So that's where my focus is now, blending these practices and wrapping it around the music that I'm working with and creating, and it's very rewarding. I'm enjoying it. Everyone has a different path as they move
Mm.
through it.
Yeah.
Some want to sing songs and get better and
Mm.
do music out and share that with people. Others just want a personal way towards being able to feel comfortable with their voice, and
Yeah. What is the
it's
feedback then? I mean, I imagine the power of a workshop brings you so far to trust, but then how do they continue? Or have you heard from participants how they felt, like how they reconnected to their voice, or do people repeatedly come? What's your experience?
Yeah, well, people do repeatedly come. What often happens, because I've been teaching these when I go to spiritual festivals, so I'll have, maybe one or two drop-ins with people over a weekend, and then we'll connect. And if they're really moved by the work, they'll come do, a 3 or 4 day retreat with me. And that's when we
Ah,
can really go deep, is when
yeah.
we have that capsule of time with the same people in a space that we can focus. Then you can really get into the emotional body and the spirit and the energy, and
Hmm.
make some breakthroughs. And then what usually happens is, if people are moved by it and it feels like it works for them, they continue privately with me.
Yeah.
And then the work takes on, whatever direction that they want to go. I have one student who's decided that he wants to be a recording artist. So he's, hooked up with a producer, and I do a lot of consulting around his songwriting, and he's learning how to, do a home studio. And then,
Yeah.
another has gotten interested in more spiritual, influenced by my Indian classical training, more, spiritual chant and really going into the purity of the tone. And we do more sort of Hindustani style
Mm-hmm.
singing. And so, I mean, it's
Mm.
really all over, people. But I find the common thread is, I see these people coming into themselves
Yeah.
and coming into their own essence of
Mm.
truth and confidence, and it's really incredible to witness. It's really beautiful. Yeah.
I love that you found this, and I love also that I found, like the time to talk to you now again as I'm at that same junction.
Oh.
I kind of my training switched to a more tantric field, where we do a lot of tandava, as my teacher calls it, and in Tandava, it's a free expression of the upper body more than the lower body. It's different than Buto, but it's almost like feeling the current of and around you and the space around you and what flows through you. And then we sit and do these meditations that are guided picture meditations, those particular tantric yogini meditations. And since I'm doing that, I felt called to start singing. And, that's why I'm back in singing now, in classical raga singing, because
Mhm.
there seems to be that connection to me too. And maybe we are all at a junction. I was thinking that, I don't know what your point of view is, but you maybe want to share it after my insight. I feel that this pandemic is so giving in a way where we can't go out and do all the things we love doing. I mean, I miss crowds and I miss workshopping, and I miss the experience of the exchange in person instead of in digital form. But on the other hand side, it's driving me really in and looking at what can I do right now? And it seems there is a lot of artistic expression that wants to come forward. And when I listen to that and I listen to other people, I hear people saying that, oh, I could write it a little bit more. I could journal. I could just write for fun. I could just sing for fun. I could just paint for fun. Is that something that comes up for you too, or you've noticed? I mean, you're an artist, so kudos, you've kind of stepped into that right away with everything you've done in life. But what's your
Yeah.
perspective on it?
I think I think there's this beautiful thing that's happened despite all of the things we miss, which is we've been given permission to spend more time in our homes and
Yeah.
with our families and with ourselves.
Yeah.
We were so pulled in every direction, with
Mm.
so many options and choices and opportunities that it was almost, I've heard of so many people who were collapsing from exhaustion because they were being so productive. They were doing so much, and yet what what's the quality of that when we're so productive to the point of exhaustion, right?
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
hear what you're saying, and I think I've experienced a similar shift. I mean, it's not without its it hasn't been all easy because, of course, there's been this lull of what happens before you reach that point, right? Where we think, oh, we're going back to normal, so I won't start something. I'll just wait. And then there's
Mm.
this sort of in between space.
Mm.
But now, as it's dragged on, I think people are realizing, hey, we're here. This is everything's changing. And I don't think we can say things are now like this and then they're going back to how they were. I think it's about adapting and these creative ways that we are adapting to this ever changing world that we're in, and when we don't know how it's going. It's right now it's this, and this will inform the new. And so
Mm.
yeah, I think it's been a blessing in a sense that just this kind of pause on the machine
Mm.
for the artistic side of ourselves.
Yeah, it's almost like what we talked about, the sense of something is dying, that you experience in butoh. And I haven't had so many people dying around me, fortunately, or witnessed so many close people, close friends, family members dying. But I remember that it often is the feeling of, okay, this person is gone. I grieve and I hope it's over. I hope it's over. That, like now I grieve and I know I return to normal. And the fact is that you never do. And in some ways, we're experiencing it right now in different ways. We only noticing what is dying outside, what kind of cultural things are dying, what will be reborn. And
Mm,
so it's really beautiful. This pandemic is a beautiful metaphor for butoh. There's death and then there is life. And
absolutely, yeah,
hmm,
yeah.
hmm, that's what I hear you say. So you said earlier that you are going to festivals. Do you want to tell our listeners where they can find you if we ever going back to festivals? I hope so.
Yeah, well, I hope to be able to come to your side of the world and do some festivals in Europe. And I've been teaching because the music expression that I've focused on in the past, 5, 6 years or so has been kirtan. It's been
Hmm.
devotional chanting. I have found a place in those festivals to do this kind of work. So I'll share music and then I'll offer workshops in vocal opening. I call it open your voice,
Hmm.
open your heart, open your voice.
Yeah.
And it's been a really wonderful place to share this work because people go to yoga festivals and these sort of spiritual music festivals looking to get clear, looking to be around other practitioners. And so
Mm,
oftentimes they're very open and ready. And we've had some really beautiful workshops on the West Coast. Bhakti Fest is one that I'll do in the
mm,
fall. And then there's a counterpoint to that, Shakti Fest in the
mm.
spring. And Oregon, we have a beautiful summer festival called the Beloved Festival, which has been
The
another.
beloved festival. Yeah, I remember you
Yeah.
going there.
Yeah, and those are, those are fun, and that's where I've been able to meet folks. And then, like I said, the best way is to do retreats. Do,
Mm,
a 3 day
mm.
or a 4 day retreat.
Yeah.
And when I'm visiting different towns, I'll do evening workshops or weekend workshops. So that's
Mm,
another way that
mm.
we can, share this work.
Amazing. And then you have an album in the working. We might mention it. So if people get interested in you and they want to hear a little bit of your kirtan, do you want to talk a
Sure,
little bit
yeah.
about the album in the making?
Yeah, the album will be out early next year.
Yeah.
It's called The Beloved Lives Inside, and it's a collection of devotional music and chant. There's both Sanskrit chant and English lyrics mixed, and it's an expression of that search for that connected love, that is
Mm,
our search for the divine, our
mm,
search for our beloved within and without.
mm,
And so, yeah, there's a collection of 7 songs. It's been a real beautiful journey over the past couple years putting these together and interfacing with other musicians. And
mm,
so that will finally be birthed. There is a track that is, like you mentioned on the Insight Timer, called
mm.
Take My Hand, which
Yes.
is kind of the title track. The chorus is the beloved lives inside. So that's out there in the world, and I've had some really beautiful feedback from folks who
It's super
got me.
beautiful. And here is a little coincidence how we're still connected. Because Kat and myself, we kind of spent some time together singing in Portland with the same teacher and talking about butoh. But and you're kind of inviting me to your house. That was beautiful. But when I saw you brought the track out, I started listening to it, and suddenly I was like, there is something that's so familiar, and it's like it sounds spooky now, and maybe some of you don't want to hear that, my dear listeners, but there was at that time I intensely listened to Neem Baba Karoli stories and Ram Das. It was like on my ears like 24/7. It was just like I was absorbing all those vibrations that were recommended to me. And because I'm so highly sensitive, I sometimes feel like there that I can pick up these sensations. And then when I noticed you're singing the song and the ram ram ram, it kind of reminded me of Baba Neem Karoli. And then I figured out you're friends with Krishna Das a little bit, and you've been seeing Ram Das, and you've been to the temple, and that was so beautiful to me at that very moment in time, meaningful to me. And you didn't know at the time, but that's how I
Wow,
feel like
that's
we are
incredible.
so connected. And that's why I treasure that song, because it reminds me of that vibration I lived in for a year very strongly.
That's pretty much how that song came through, is that I was also living in that vibration. Yeah.
Really?
And the first time I was able to share that song in a kirtan in a public, room full of people, I was at Ram Dass's house in Maui. It was the first time I got to meet him in
Ah,
person, and I
wow.
got to sing that song for
Ooh.
the very first time out live in
Yeah.
front of Ram Dass. And it was, I felt like that precise energy that you're saying is what brought that song through, being really deeply enmeshed in the teachings of Baba Neem Karoli and Ram Dass, and feeling that love.
Wow.
So that's incredible that you
That's
recount
so
that.
incredible indeed. And talking about like shyness and finding your voice, I wouldn't be able to sing that in front of him. I mean, not that I'm able to sing, but in the same manner. How much did that take you to really kind of bring your voice to do it, or was it
Yeah,
just easy?
no, I mean, it's interesting because the practice is all about just doing your practice. And so you get so used to doing your practice that when you get in front of people, sure, you have nerves, but then once the music starts, there's this part of you that knows that practice,
Yes.
and you go into your practice, and
Yeah.
the practice takes you through, and
Yes.
you let go of the ego of like, oh, will I mess up, am I good enough? None of that matters, because it's the practice and you're just sharing practice. And that's the beauty of this form of devotional music, and
Yeah.
all the while you're getting better at sharing it because
Mm.
there's less interfering. it's
Mm.
it's very similar to the butoh. It's if you're thinking about trying to do something well,
Mm.
the connection will be severed almost because the
Yeah.
mental space gets in the way of the energy,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely. It's always the same with my teaching, like I know what you mean with practice. I've been practicing so long. Yoga is like just such a long part of my life, or such an intense part of my life, or used to be, and I still can just stand up and it falls off me, as you describe it. The same notion of it just falls off me, everything that's my ego. I just stand there and teach, and I wonder, how did this person arrive? Is this not really me? Is this really me, or is it not? And I think it's more real than any other personas we carry around in this life, on a day-to-day level. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yoga is probably really what got me there,
Hmm.
you know
Hmm.
all of these practices, but I think
Yeah.
yoga was the backbone.
Very good. Kat, is there anything you want to leave with the listeners now that we're coming to the end of the show? Is there something you want to recommend or say, like an insight you have currently, something you want to give or gift?
Yeah, well, I would say be kind to yourself and know that your voice and your expression, however that comes through, whether it's writing or dance or, research, whatever it is that is your passion, that is your dharma, that's such an important piece of the puzzle. And to listen to what makes your heart beat stronger and to
Yeah.
allow for that to come through because the world wants your gifts.
Yes. Thank you. I relate, and I thank you for those words of wisdom. Yeah, and I thank you also for making time and coming onto the show. And I wish you best of luck with the release of the album and with your project, that it can stay alive, the combination of butoh and singing and finding your voice. Yeah, thanks
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, pleasure. So great to see you again and talk with you.
Yeah, it's total pleasure to see you. Mm. Goodbye, dear listener. See you next week. If you enjoy listening to my podcast, please consider to become a patron at patreon.com/Alexandra Kreis and pledge your donation.